This is the Mooncast.
See you, space cowboy.
So, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So last we left off with the CPI report, right? And now we're moving on to talk about the IMF, right? So it's a very, very, very important international organization, right? And they aim to promote international monetary cooperation and financial stability. So before, in the past, one thing that was an issue was if one country owed another country money, and then there was no way to really mediate that, right? And that was the ideal, air quotations, of what the IMF was designed to do, right? Was to be that mediation, and where countries that were facing economic instability, or they, messed up the terms or went bankrupt, from borrowing from another country, that there was a mediator to be able to facilitate financial transactions, right? And that's what the IMF was designed to do. It was created in 1944, shortly after World War II, right? In the Bretton Woods Conference, right? And officially established in 1945, right? Where were we, right? We, as in Africans, we were colonized, right? So we weren't part of this particular arrangement, right? And so when you look at the purpose of the IMF, right? So the economic stability, right? So like I said, the IMF works to ensure stability of the international monetary system, financial assistance. So I say that loosely, financial assistance, right? It provides financial support to countries facing balance of payments problems, right? And the policy advice, right? So the IMF offers policy advice to help countries maintain economic stability and growth, right? So to translate that policy advice, right? What that means is they can impose austerity measures, right? So they could say, hey, we'll give you money, but at a 30 to 50% interest rate, and you need to increase taxes and basically destroy your economy, right? And then they use that as a way to destabilize actually economies, right? These loans, they're kind of like loan sharks. If anyone knows what loan sharks are, that's basically what they do. They look for areas where is a need, and then they loan shark you with really bad loan agreements where, they start asking you, hey, you need to allow same-sex marriage, maybe, and even that's not part of your cultural blueprint, right? And they just try to enforce these things as contingencies on top of the loan, which makes absolutely no sense because it just be financial, right? China does different stuff, right? China just comes in and says, hey, we're going to give you a loan, and then we don't care what you do with your loan. And then the loan is usually at a really favorable rate, actually. So that's how that works, right? In this fiat model. So when you look at the capacity development, right? So it provides technical assistance and training to help countries improve their economic management. It does not do that, right? This is what they say they're supposed to do, right? But as you guys know, the IMF are a bunch of, I'm trying to say, use the right professional term, but they do not do what they say they're going to do. So if they say that, hey, we're going to provide assistance, what that means is we'll give you a loan, but then we're going to use the companies in the West to come into your region, right? If it's a developing country or a global South country, they usually then take those companies in the West, and then they'll then develop the things that they want to develop as part of the contingency of the agreement, and then take that monies, right, from those companies that are established there now, and it's now this becomes this form of economic colonization, right, where they take then the monies from your country and ship it back out to Western countries, right? And this is part of this these arrangements that they make, right? So you have to really, really watch these closely, because they're not favorable for you and weren't designed for you, because you were, or as an African, you were colonized, right, when these arrangements were made. So it's it's insignificant to an African, right? And we're gonna look a little bit into the key functions, right, and also talk about the monitoring, for instance, right? So keeps track of the global economies of member countries, right? Which we'll get into the member countries, right? And then lending, right? So provides loans to member countries in need of financial assistance, and again, advising with the economic policies, right? And these are the list of all the 44 countries that signed this agreement, right, for the IMF, right? So the only country here that's from Africa is South Africa, right? And the reason for that is because when South Africa came into, or when Holland came into South Africa, they planned on staying, right? They didn't plan on leaving. And so this is why, it's more of a Eurocentric African country currently right now. And this is why they're part of this arrangement. But you don't see any African country part of this arrangement. So it's not favorable for Africa at all. And Africa doesn't need these arrangements because Africa has overabundance of resources. Africa, as previously stated before the course started, I was talking with Yufian about Africa. They just need to nationalize their products and their riches, manufacture and refine their raw materials into finished products, and then ship finished products through exporting to others at a favorable cost basis, right? And that's what Africa needs to do. And it doesn't even need to do that to the outside world. It can do that within its borders, right? So again, I'm building out as I think I previously stated, a new economic model. And I don't like to use the word economics because I said economics is the definition of scarcity. So I'm building out a new model that is more prevalent to Africa, right? So it's something that a lot of Africans don't understand, right? These terms in economics and how does everything work and how does everything function? How does the money work? And what systems are put in place to sort of stifle and cripple, right, the economy. And there should be no reason why there's debt in Africa at all. It makes absolutely no sense when you have all those raw materials and all those human capital and abundance of sunshine. It doesn't make absolutely any sense at all. So this is the 44 countries, like I said, that signed the agreement. And again, South Africa is the only one that's technically air quotations African. And that's partly due to the fact that they have a lot of Eurocentric influence, right? So the imbalances, right? So this is, again, stuff that I was talking about. So the quota system. So a country's quota based on its economic size determines its voting power, right? So larger economies have larger quotas and consequently more voting power, right? So what does that mean? That essentially means that obviously in this particular landscape of economics that we live in with fiat currency, the people who control the money have the power, right? And the people who control the money currently are Western powers, right? So the little guy has no say. That's basically all that's saying, right? The smaller countries have no say, right? Because they were oppressed, colonized, etc. If you guys aren't familiar with colonization, you should definitely go back and look into the effects of colonization and what that's done and why the world does look the way it does currently right now. But that's part of the reason, right? And so veto power, right? So while there is no explicit veto power, countries with a substantial voting shares can effectively block decisions, right? So the United States is the largest shareholder, which holds significant influence, right, in the IMF, right? And with voting favoritism, right? So while there's not explicitly stated, it's evident that the countries with closer political economic ties, right? So you're talking about the West, to influential members often receive preferential treatment. So obviously, this organization was meant for specific powers that are currently ruling, right? Because they control the money, and the money is fake, but they've marketed to everybody that it's real. And this is why the world is the way it is currently right now, right? And Africa keeps going to the IMF when they don't need to go to the IMF. They just need to stop corruption, start nationalizing their products. And like I said, I repeat that again, nationalize your products, refine, manufacture your raw materials, export them out. It's very, very simple. Everybody with the brain knows that. And now it's finally slowly starting to happen. And we hope to see more of that, right? So also the IMF comes with strict austerity measures, like I previously stated, that may go against country morals, values, culture, and economic benefits, right? Like I previously stated already and gave examples of, right? So the IMF utilization disadvantages, right? So the IMF loans come with strict austerity measures, like I previously stated, right? So examples, right? So same-sex marriage, like I previously stated, like they do the loan sharking thing, like I already previously stated, right? Which is a debt trap, basically, is what they put you in. And they give a loan under certain conditions that you have to use their favorite companies to solve the problem, like I previously stated already. And this usually ends up doing more damage as liquidity is not circulating within the country, right? As I previously stated already, right? And that's why you see these multinational companies in Africa, and you're wondering, like, why aren't the local businesses and why aren't they promoting local businesses? It's because they've signed these arrangements with the IMF to get money that they don't even need to then allow these multinational corporations to come into Africa to extract the resources, treat workers bad, pay them very little, extract as much money as possible, and ship it out back to their country, right? And this is why a country that has very little to no resources is able to outperform a country that has all the resources, right? And yeah, so that's the detriment. That's just the truth of how the world currently works, right? Has anyone had any questions? No? Okay. So, World Bank versus the IMF. Just a quick, brief description of this, right? So, the IMF, like I said, maintains stability, international monetary trade, oversees global economy, provides loans to countries in financial difficulty, and offers the advice in economic policies, right? Whereas the World Bank, they focus on reducing poverty and promotes sustainable development, right? Loans and grants to developing countries, supports long-term economic growth and development, offers technical assistance and knowledge sharing, right? In that sense, the IMF is more focused on short-term economic stability, while the World Bank concentrates on long-term development, right? So one is short-term, one is long-term. That's all you basically need to know. And they both kind of are in cahoots with one another, and they both basically do the same thing, which is nothing, right? They do absolutely nothing for the global South at all, right? They often work together to address economic challenges faced by developing countries, which they do not, right? As you can see, the proof is in the pudding. You guys that live in developing countries, air quotation, developing countries, you see what's going on with the infrastructure, the issues with jobs, and etc. Right? So they've done absolutely nothing for you and your country. They're not good organizations, right? So what makes crypto different to fiat, right? Based off everything that we've been teaching about with the smart as money principles. If you guys, like I said, you're just joining in now, you can go back and backtrack the last two, part 1, part 2 of what is money. But yeah, so with Bitcoin, well, Bitcoin is different from crypto, right? So I'll just focus on crypto for now. So crypto is more decentralized. You have self-custody of the wealth, right? It's pseudo-anonymous, it's transparent, and it's peer-to-peer. Bitcoin actually fixes the money, right? So crypto is a separate thing from fiat or from Bitcoin, right? So Bitcoin and fiat are two separate things. Crypto is a CEO that builds a company and leverages blockchain technology to enhance, pseudo anonymity, self custody, and be more decentralized and have less friction, right? Bitcoin fixes the money itself, right? So that's the differences between crypto and Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin fixes the money itself, right? Because it's fully decentralized, right? There is no CEO, right? That's leveraging a blockchain. There's no registration, company registration number. It's a decentralized pseudonymous protocol that runs with a group of pseudonymous miners globally that help to basically verify transactions on chain, right? And basically there's an account ledger, and every time that me and you transact, the miners then verify the transaction, and then also it gets put into the account ledger, right? And that's how. And there's only a significant amount of block space and significant amount of transactions that can go in each block. And as those transactions occur, once that capacity is reached, then that gets finalized right on chain. And that's basically how Bitcoin works, right? Crypto is something a little bit more different, it's nuanced, and yeah, there's space. I think in how I see it, there's space for both, right? But one of them is a completely different thing, right? But anyways, this is how crypto itself differentiates itself from fiat, right? So I wanted to explain too as well the Bitcoin ETFs and ETFs in general, right? So the Bitcoin ETFs is a type of investment fund that tracks the price of Bitcoin, right? So this is something that just recently launched, right? So it's an exchange traded fund, right? An ETF, that's what an ETF is, right? And it's done on a traditional stock exchange, like the stock market, the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ and et cetera, right? So it's an indirect investment, right? So instead of buying Bitcoin directly, you buy shares of the ETF, right? Which holds Bitcoin as an underlying asset, right? So what does that mean? Let me just break it down to you very, very simply, right? instead of you actually holding the actual Bitcoin, which is the whole point of Bitcoin itself, right? Is the fact that you can self-custody that asset yourself. It's the first digital product ever where you can fully self-custody it yourself. And nobody can ever get access to it unless you give them the access to your seed phrase. I don't want to reiterate, some of the stuff that Emmanuel was going through in his course. You guys can check that one out too as well, because we did do a blockchain basics course. But I just want to kind of tie the things all together so you guys can get a little bit better understanding, right? What you're doing with a Bitcoin ETF is a company, like say I set up a company and I say, hey, if you don't want to self-custody, if you don't want to hold the Bitcoin yourself and you're too scared, you're not tech savvy or whatever, you don't have any sophistication when it comes to tech, I will then issue out these shares, right? These Bitcoin shares, right? So you would give me your fiat. You would buy these shares of Bitcoin, which aren't actually the Bitcoin itself because it's not on chain, right? And I would take that money and then give you the shares and then take the money that you gave me and then go buy the actual Bitcoin, right? In the case of, for instance, the BlackRock ETF, which is infamously known currently right now, right? Because BlackRock is the number one investment firm in the world, right? With, I think, $11 trillion in assets under management, right? So the biggest hedge fund in the world. What they're doing is they're taking your fiat, right, which is your cash. You're getting then a digital representation of the actual Bitcoin, but it's not the Bitcoin itself, right, which is a share. They're taking that fiat and they're actually giving it off to their custodian, which is Coinbase. And then Coinbase is buying and securing the Bitcoin on behalf of BlackRock. Now, tell me, why would it make sense for you to store the most premier inflation savings technology in the world through a company when you can just store it yourself, right? What would happen in the case of the event that you would want to get your Bitcoin back? They wouldn't give you your Bitcoin back. They would just give you cash, right? And it's the same trick that they use with gold, right? Back in the day, right? They did the same exact thing. We're like, oh, your gold is safe. You can store it here. And then eventually they just started giving you the paper dollars instead of the gold. And then they confiscated the gold, right? Because they already had custody of it. And it's the same thing in a digital version. So I hope you guys understand that, right? It's very, very important to understand the differences and nuances between that, right? I want to break that down because it's very important for understanding money and how it works, right? You want the actual Bitcoin, right? You don't want a digital representation. This is why when I tell people, it's the same thing with gold, right? People who buy gold, it's best to actually have the actual gold and not the derivative of the gold, right? You want the actual gold. And in this case, Bitcoin is digital gold. So you want the actual Bitcoin itself. I hope that I broke that down and it's clear for people to understand. So yeah, so the reason that people would use these products is because of the ease of access, right? So it allows investors to gain exposure to Bitcoin without needing to manage a digital wallet or navigate cryptocurrency exchanges, right? So this is, again, for the non-technically savvy people. Again, if that's what you want to do and just track the price and then take profits, that's totally okay. If you want to continue to believe in fiat currency based off of everything that I've been teaching you guys over this past two, part 1, part 2, and now the part 3 series, then that is, everyone has their own decisions to make, right, as their own sovereign investor, right? But I would hope that based off of the enlightenment I've been able to give you guys on these courses, that you would then maybe reconsider your thought process in exchanging a finite supply that is actually an inflation hedge for an infinite supply, right? It's like trading a asset for a liability. That's what you're essentially doing. But yeah. So again, just a little bit more of a breakdown of the ETFs, right? So it's in a regulated environment. So it's another reason people like it, because for some reason people love regulations. I don't know why, because, I like the free market. I like more of the Austrian style economics, right? That's just me, but to each their own, right? And another thing too, as well, is diversification. So some Bitcoin ETFs may also include other assets related to Bitcoin, right? Offering a way to diversify within the crypto space. So people who like that. And market hours. So unlike cryptocurrencies, which can be traded 24/7, Bitcoin ETFs are subject to trading hours of the stock exchange they are listed on, right? So people who haven't traded stocks before, stocks are only opened for a limited amount of time each day, Monday through Friday, right? Whereas crypto is 24/7, 365 all the time, right? So that's the difference between the cryptocurrency market and because it's not a regulated environment, right? It's peer to peer, right? So it's completely different. It's the freest form of financial markets the world has ever seen, right? The purest form of it. So we're gonna move in a little bit and talk about the BRICS because another very very important organization to really understand, right?
Uh,
So
can I add something before you go on to BRICS?
please.
All right. Just for the ETFs, and another reason some people like the ETF is because of the products the ETFs can issue to them, of which if you hold Bitcoin in self-custody, you might not have advantage to. I'm not saying ETFs are better. I'm just saying the reason people will buy into ETF compared to holding Bitcoin for self-custody. For example, let's say you have ETF shares of like iShares of BlackRock, and BlackRock can easily give you a credit on your shares, right? They can give you, you can probably use your shares as collateral, and maybe take loan or something, or take an advantage of a product that BlackRock is issuing.
yes,
So that's for an ETF. So on an ETF, there might be some product, and this is how they also used to entice uh, what would I call them? Those who want to take advantage of the services they are rendering. So they might issue some kind of, with some perks. They might issue some kind of products. The one that's coming to my head is some credits, right? Or maybe
yes,
leverage products.
yes,
So then you
collateral.
can use collateral. So you can use your ETFs as collateral to take loan and all those stuff. So that
Yeah,
is one. The next one is for people who have unit buyers. So you'll be thinking instead of buying one Bitcoin at $64,000, I can buy ETFs at $34, right? So I can buy one ETF at $34, and so they have this unit, just like it's just like when companies do stock splits. So they are
yes,
trying to break that hindrance of high price, right? But when they don't also know that when they do the stock split, they are also diluting the pool, right? So they are also diluting the pool. So it doesn't really matter. For example, Nvidia did a stock split when it was $1,200, right? $1,200. They did a stock split, so you could buy it at $120 instead of 1,200. And I think MicroStrategy is also talking of doing something like that, 10-1. So instead of buying it at 1,700, when they do a 10-1 split, that means for each share there's a split of 10. So instead of buying it at 1.7, you are buying it at $170. But your how would I put it? The part of your pie in relative to the company's market cap or net asset value has reduced, something like that. So it only
yes,
benefit those who had it before the stock split, not those who are
e-
buying it after the stock split.
exactly.
Right. So,
Yeah,
but this is just the reason why some individuals prefer this product. So the product they can offer in advantage of holding their shares, and because these are securities, right? So and unit buyers also, because when you're holding a commodity, there is no security products for you. You're just holding the commodity. But when you are holding a security, there can be layers of products that the issuer or the company can rail out to the public, and then they take advantage of it. So I just wanted to add those two.
yeah. Thanks, Stan. That's great feedback too as well. And I actually talked about this particular advantage in a previous podcast earlier this year. I want to say in January or February. So I might actually drop that into the chat later so you guys can check that out too as well, just to get a little bit more details and information on how the ETFs can be leveraged. So some people who, like I said, like to what we call in the crypto space be degenerates, instead of just holding an asset that just goes up in value and forever, they'd rather, oh, it's taking too long to go up in value. So let me try to use it as collateral to try to make extra money. I personally don't play in those type of markets, but it's definitely a very, very good point and a talking point too as well to know as another advantage as to why people would choose the ETF, because there is no product yet. When I say yet, because there will be eventually a product on top of Bitcoin that is credit based, because I did talk about this too in a podcast I'm going to be releasing with somebody about the credit layer on top of Bitcoin that needs to occur so that we can have these time locked smart contracts and use Bitcoin as collateral to be able to facilitate different financial instruments for people to use and leverage. So great stuff. Yeah.
And let me just and when we use the word leverage, we don't mean futures leverage, right? Not that kind of leverage, not derivative leverage. So people don't think you're talking of futures leverage on Bitcoin. No, not what's it called? No, yeah, it's futures, not futures leverage. When we say leverage, it means using your Bitcoin as collateral to take advantage of fiat or credit to buy more. So instead of selling your Bitcoin to buy something, then I'm saying even on exchanges they do this. I've actually done it on exchange. Actually on the lows, I use some Bitcoin as collateral to take more fiat to buy more Bitcoin. So it's like a leverage product. But then remember there are counterparty risks to that. So anything you are doing on leverage, which is not a decentralized maybe DeFi product, there's always a counterparty risk to that. So I just wanted to add that the leverage here is not futures leverage. It's not trading futures leverage, it's just collateral. That's what it's talking about.
Yeah. Great point. Thank you for clearing that up for people who can't decipher the difference. So yeah. So moving forward with BRICS. So does anybody here know anything about BRICS? Have you heard about BRICS? Anybody? No?
Yeah, the new Bretton Woods.
Yeah, so BRICS is an economic bloc, right? And it's a group of 5 major emerging economies, right? Which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And some of the key points is that these countries are among the world's largest and fastest growing economies. And in terms of cooperation, they work together to promote economic growth, trade, and investment among themselves, right? So I'm gonna tie it all together, right? Just give me a second. So global influence, right? So BRICS aims to provide a counterbalance to the economic power of Western countries and institutions like the IMF and World Bank, which is what I really already stated and talked to you guys about, how those are not beneficial to the global South and those that have kind of been left out of this trade imbalance, right? So they plan to combat that organization, right? And so they have annual summits, right? So the member countries meet annually to discuss and coordinate policies in various economic and political issues. And new members, recently, countries like Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the UAE have joined, expanding the bloc's influence. So just let you guys know, there's an estimated, I think the last time I checked, about 62 countries on the wait list for BRICS. There's about 195 countries in the world. So they're growing rapidly. And it's another one of these organizations that plans to make the trade more fair for countries that it's been unfair for a long duration of time, right? So if you guys don't know what's happening, particularly in Africa, majority of African countries are joining the BRICS, which again, they don't have to. This is the thing with Africa. The ball is literally in Africa's court. Africa has all the leverage because Africa has all the resources and the human capital and the skills, right? The sooner Africa is able to realize that, which is what they're starting to realize now with stuff that's going on now, the easier the lives of Africans are going to be, because they don't need to join BRICS. They don't need China. They don't need any of this stuff, right? The minute that we all decide as Africans to unite and work together for one common goal, right? All this stuff goes away, right? We can start then manufacturing, start moving around borderlessly, but anyways, for this particular purpose of this course, a lot of African countries are deciding to join the BRICS it's been more advantageous in general to for Africans to align with Russia and in China, not just in Africa, but all of the entire global South, right? Because they actually do fair trade. So as you guys know, China has been kind of all over in Africa, but you see the results, at least with the Chinese, right? You see the results. They actually do what they say they're going to do when they make these trade agreements, right? And so they're not really hawkish like the same as the West, who just want to kind of leech, from Africa and not really help develop it, right? So that's what I would say the differences and nuances between it. And the goal, because what's ends up happening right now, right, as I previously stated in the other course, right, we're going towards a transition phase because the fiat currency is collapsing, right, which is it's inevitable for fiat to collapse, right? The inflation you're seeing in Nigeria or in Ghana or wherever you're seeing it at, wherever you are around the globe, it's not going to stop, right? And it's also happening. What you don't understand is if you think you want to go to the United States, it's way worse because you need way more money to make a living, right? Like $4,000, $5,000 a month is not really going to cut it in the United States for one person nowadays in a lot of areas, right? Just to tell you like how crazy the inflation is there. So the inflation is bad everywhere. It's just some currencies are inflating faster than other currencies. So you're just going to trade one bad situation for a lesser but still bad situation, right? So all the currencies around the globe are all crashing at different time frames, right? The one that matters the most is the US dollar because the global reserve currency. Okay, so soon, because now the flipping has already happened where they now have more debt than economic production. So that flipping has already occurred. At some point, the debt is going to be 2 to 3 to 4 times the amount of economic production, right? And how do countries make money? Like I said, they make it either through taxation, air quotations, which is BS anyways, or they make money through printing money, right? Or they make money through borrowing debt from other organizations or countries, right? Those are the only three ways they can really make money, right? So we're going to get to a point where the debt bubble is so big and it's so large, which is happening very, very soon, right? As you guys can see, there's a squeeze happening. You feel it probably in your economies. It's the same everywhere. Everybody's getting squeezed everywhere around the world. There's nobody that's really not getting squeezed, right? Unless you're El Salvador, right? I don't know if you guys know, but El Salvador made Bitcoin legal tender, and you can Bitcoinize over there. And so you're probably not feeling it like that in El Salvador. But for the countries who haven't yet, who haven't gotten the full grunt and the full entire picture, their middle classes are all getting squeezed. Doesn't matter if it's the US, doesn't matter if it's the UK, doesn't matter if it's Kenya, doesn't matter if it's Nigeria. It's happening everywhere at different time frames. So that's what I need you guys to really understand, right? So don't think that, if I move here, it's going to be better. Yeah, maybe you can extract a little bit more liquidity from savings and then bring it back to your country and play the geo arbitrage with currencies, right? Yeah, but the cost of living is so high, it's very hard for people to save money, right? The average, a lot of, there was a stat about, a lot of US citizens don't even have savings, right? Or they barely have like a few $1,000s of savings, right? Imagine in the US, where the average salaries is super high, because the cost of living is so much and you have to pay for way more things, right? This is why I want to get you guys to understand. You have to pay for way more bills in the West than you do in Africa, right? So what you need to focus on is understand that Africa has all of the resources. So when the currency collapses, everyone's going to run to raw materials, natural resources, and the scarcest digital commodity on the planet, which is Bitcoin. And it's happening now. I don't know if you guys seen what's happening right now with the current elections in the US, but it's the first ever crypto centric election, right? They're really focused on talking about crypto and Bitcoin specifically, and how they can maybe use Bitcoin as a national reserve to back some of the dollars in Bitcoin, right? This is what Trump and Robert F. Kennedy are talking about, right? So and there's actually a bill getting put in place, a crypto bill, right? Or not a crypto bill, but a Bitcoin backed reserve bill, that's actually getting put into place or being presented to Congress, right? So this is all happening in real time. It's happening very, very quickly. And if the US starts doing it, China's there's already the game theory already started with El Salvador as the first nation state to do it, right? So they're already ahead of the game. So, and it just makes sense, right? Also, as well, you can use Bitcoin as leverage to bypass sanctions, right? You see now, recently, Russia just approved cryptocurrency and Bitcoin for international trade, right? Between businesses, which people were already doing that before, right? I was in Ghana and I was talking to a guy that said that he had been doing international trade with the Chinese since 2016 with Bitcoin, right? So these things were already happening. It's just the government hadn't approved it, right? So you didn't really hear about it. So I want to make you guys really understand these things because there's a new economic block happening, right? So what I think is going to happen is what I think. I think the dollar will eventually fade out. We're going to move into a multipolar, technocentric type of environment. And there will be multiple reserve currencies that will be competing with each other. And I think the hardest, soundest money will win, right? So I think it's going to be the dollar still with some percentage in market share. BRICS currency will probably have their own thing, right, with some percentage of market share. And then there'll be Bitcoin, right? And then hopefully if we'll see what happens with the Sahel states and how they're moving in terms of if they can also join the party too as well, maybe not. But the point is, if those are some of the competitors, the hardest, soundest, most decentralized sovereign money will win, right? Because the free market will choose the best form of money every single time. So I think ultimately Bitcoin will win, but it's going to take a little bit of time. I don't think it's going to go directly from the dollar crashing to then everyone just hyper Bitcoinizing. I don't think so. This is what I think. I could be wrong, but I think we're going to move into a more multi-polar type of environment and multi-reserve currency type of landscape. And then eventually the soundest money will win. I think Bitcoin is the soundest money. So any questions? No? Okay. All right. So we're going to move into economic colonization, right? So you guys can understand what is happening in Africa, right? Because it's very, very important. Sometimes when you're on the ground, you don't really know what's going on. You think it's the fuel prices should be lower than what they are. You think that's the issue. Or you think it's the government, it's the bad government. Yeah, it can be part of the issue, but I try to tie all the stuff together to help you fully grasp what is happening, right? So I explained to you already how the IMF is part of the reason why the economies are shattering a lot in the global South specifically, but in Africa, obviously too as well, right? So economic colonization refers to the process where a powerful country exerts economic control over a less powerful country, right? This often involves exploiting the resources, labor, and markets of the colonized country for the benefit of the colonizing country, right? And again, I explained to you one example of how they do that, right? They come in with, we'll give you a loan with the IMF. It's a loan shark deal, really, really bad. You take the deal because you think you can't do it yourself, or you have greedy politicians who don't care and they want dollars, and then they want to take those dollars and move it overseas to buy real estate properties and other assets and whatever that they do, and not care for the people. And they think that there's nothing that they can do. They're debt trapped because they're colonizing their mind. They don't understand that everything that they need is right there in front of their face, right? And in return for this bad loan that they get from the IMF will say, hey, we'll bring our Western corporations into your country to start running mining operations. They won't be able to get taxed, right? Or to start facilitating different restaurants, etc. McDonald's, whatever, right? And they come in there and bring their businesses there. Those businesses extract basically all of the riches, the capital, and they take it directly back to the Western country, right? So this is what is happening, right? And this is how you're being colonized, right? And it's only able to be possible. It's not every African country that's like that. It's only able to be possible if your government is corrupt, right? So if your government's not corrupt, this isn't possible, right? The reason that Africa got colonized in the first place is because there were bad actors within the ranks of Africa, right? So if we all unite and there's unity, this doesn't happen. It's impossible to happen, right? You can't just come in and exploit Africa if the leader says no, right? So you have some really good leaders that are changing some stuff, that are doing some good stuff. So this is basically, I want you guys to understand this, right? What is happening to you, right? And how to defend yourself and how to stop it, right? This is why these protests are happening. This is why I'm very, very hopeful for these protests that are happening, that they will make some actual change to stop bad governance and corruption and look right in front of them at the obvious, right?
Hey bro, I'm just trolling is something that will not just challenge your perspective, but also touch your heart and soul. It's a book that defies convention, blending art and literature into a thought-provoking masterpiece. A reflective piece of provocative art that tackles societal constructs from angles you've never considered. Hey bro, I'm just trolling delves into the very essence of our existence. It questions the technology that surrounds us, challenges our notions of beauty, stares unflinchingly into the eyes of death, and questions the boundaries of freedom. It scrutinized the educational system that molds our very future. This book is a journey, an exploration of shared human experience, and it's a work of art that refuses to be confined by tradition. It's a canvas painted with words, a melody of thought, and a testament to the power of creativity in a world dominated by algorithms and data. Visit moonboycapitalventures.com and get your hands on Hey Bro, I'm Just Trolling today. It's not just a book, it's a movement. Now let's jump back into the show.
So again, key characteristics, right? So resource exploitation, which we touched upon, right? And then they also have the economic dependence, right? So the colonized country becomes economically dependent on the colonizing country, right? Limiting its ability to develop independently, right? Which is what's kind of happened in Africa, where the data is not controlled by you. The media, most of it is not controlled by you, right? The direction in which and how the infrastructure is going to get developed is not controlled by you, right? The Wi-Fi, you have a cable that runs through the ocean, to connect you to Wi-Fi and to connect you to the internet. So, and it doesn't need to be that way. It doesn't need to be that way. Africa is more than capable, way more than capable to develop all these things themselves, right? So it creates this facade that you're interdependent on somebody when you can do things for yourself, right? And own everything, own all your resources, own your infrastructure. And if you don't own that, you're a slave, right? Put simply, you're a slave, right? Like if you don't even own the money that you trade with, right? Like you look at a CFA franc, where the money gets printed in France, and then they give 50% of that money, the GDP, to France, right? In the form of colonial taxation, right? So for those who don't know, that's what's going on, right? So if you don't even own your own currency, you're a slave, right? And that's part of the economic colonization. So if somebody wants to jump in, yeah, go ahead, tell me.
I'm still wondering why that, because these are, I think they're up to 15 countries, right? The CFA.
Yeah, some of them are moving from it
francophone
now. Like the Sahel states are moving away from it now.
Okay, and I still don't know why that thing is still going on. It's been a very long time, and for France to be printing their money and sending it to them and taking 50% of, I don't know. I think they should just dump that currency and just embrace Bitcoin, because even their leaders are not even enjoying their wealth. Not to talk of the citizens. It doesn't make
Yeah,
sense. I don't know why. I
it
don't
doesn't
know why
make
that thing
sense.
is still going on.
I think it's one, fear, and two, they're still colonizing the mind, right? So we need to decolonize. We decolonize physically, but we never decolonize spiritually, economically, right? And mentally. So these three things need to happen. And part of the problem too, as well, is the lack of the correct education from, we kept the colonial schooling.
Yeah,
right?
That's the cancer.
So colonial schooling teaches you that you shouldn't be expressive with your hair, which we were always expressive with our hair. So we're taught to go to school and all wear the same uniform and not be expressive, when actually Africa was quite the opposite. If you look at history, we were very expressive with ourselves. Our hair was part of our expression. Another thing too, as well, is learning about your culture, right? A lot of people think that, still to this day in Africa, they think that the West brought civilization to Africa. when Africa was already civilized before the West came there. They had the richest man still recorded history in Mansa Musa. They had all these different infrastructures. The Great Wall of Benin was even bigger than the Great Wall of China. A lot of people don't know this stuff, right? So this is stuff that's part of decolonizing your mind, understanding who you are, right? And part of that is owning your education, which we don't even own ourselves, right? Again, it's part of the problem, right? Where it creates this interdependency, right? Where you think that you're reliant on the colonial power, but you actually don't need them, right? It's almost like an abusive relationship, right? When girls get abused, right? Unfortunately, what ends up happening is they go back to their abuser, right? It's a psychological thing, right? So we need to break the psychological chain. And then when they want to leave, they're scared because they think, oh no, I need this man for X, Y, and Z. But actually, in reality, you don't. He's just manipulated you and tricked you, right? So he can keep abusing you. And it's the same concept with what's been happening to Africa. So it's very important you guys understand these topics, right? Understand what is happening to you, right? You have the power. You always did. You always did, right? They just make you perceive that you didn't have the power. And that's part of the trick. It's all the game, right? So it creates this trade imbalance, obviously, because when you're like, I'll give you another example with Niger, they were sending their uranium to France at 80 cents per pound. And France was going back and selling that uranium for 200 pounds or 200 euros per pound. Sorry. So they made almost a 50x return, something like that. It's like no, more than a 50x return. Sorry, my math is off. Yeah. It's like a what, 150x return? Something like this? Something crazy like that, right? You're looking at 150 to 200x return, right? On revenue, right? And why are they doing that? Because they don't have a refinery. They don't have manufacturing, right? And when they're asked, hey, can you build a refinery? Of course, the colonial power says no. You would just only be to ship us raw materials so that we can power our country, and then you can't power yours. Uranium is needed to power countries with electricity, right? So a lot of people don't know what is happening, right? So this is why Niger broke free and the coup happened. So I'm trying to help you guys understand the bigger picture, right, of what is happening, right? It's very, very simple. There are some leaders that are still trying to appease the interest of not their people, of outside external people, right? So they need to be stopped, or they need to be influenced by their people to do the right thing, right? Or they need to be replaced, right? It's very, very simple, so that we can do the simple thing. It's very simple to solve Africa. Unity, nationalize all your resources, manufacture and refine. I keep repeating the same thing, and then export it to either one another or to external people if you don't want to export it to one another. But we can simply just export it to one another. We don't need anybody, right? So moving on, I've already talked about this. I'm not going to talk about this again. This is the CFA Frank, that example that I was giving you. Actually, I can break a little bit of this down a little bit more, right? So we could talk about, when it was introduced, right? It was introduced by France in 1945, right, to serve its colonies in Africa. So it's a fixed exchange rate. It's pegged to the euro, right? How crazy is this? You're pegging a paper or a digital paper, in this sense, air quotations, currency, to another paper currency. It doesn't make any sense. If anybody thinks it makes sense, please interject. But it doesn't make sense to peg a fake currency with another fake currency when you have natural resources. At least you could back it with your natural resources if you're not going to use Bitcoin, right? That would be a better model, not the best model. But this fake fugazi interdependency needs to go away, right?
Okay. Let me say something. There was one day I was actually talking with my mom, and I was telling her that it was quite beneficial to the Biafrans that they didn't win the war. She was upset. Now, when I said that, it's not like, of course, some people are from the south, some people are from the west and all that, and the north and all that. So everyone wants their own side to win. So I'm from the south, and she was like, no, we're supposed to live with Biafra, and Nigeria is supposed to. I was saying, okay, yes, the intention was quite okay. But for the fact that the person who was sponsoring what was it called? Biafran, which was the president of France, Charles de Gaulle. That was in 1960, during the 1960-1967 time. He was the president, and he was actually the one pushing for Biafra to join the Francophone side, which is he was sponsoring it from Cote d'Ivoire. So when I said that, she was actually angry. But I told her that, assuming, because if you notice, during the war, during that 1967 to 1970 war, the first thing that Charles de Gaulle asked Ojukwu to do was to make French speaking compulsory in the Biafran land. In fact, they were teaching them French while they were fighting war. In fact, that was the most important thing for him. So that was a form of colonization, and he was the one actually sponsoring Biafra. And assuming Biafra won, they would have been part of the CFA. But she didn't know this aspect. When I told her, she was like, "Whoa."
Yeah.
I just wanted to bring that in.
That's a really good nugget, man. I appreciate it. Keep interjecting too if you have other things to say, man. It's great to add value to this because it's very, very important for the audience to understand this, right? So again, like I previously stated, so the member countries are required to deposit 50% of their foreign exchange reserves with the French Treasury, right? It's theft. That just means theft, right? So economic control. This system allows France to maintain economic influence over its former colonies, impacting their economic sovereignty, right? So this is another form of economic colonization. I've explained to you a couple different examples. This is one of them, right? Now, economic imperialism, right? So it's a broader concept that involves extending a country's power and influence through diplomacy, military force, or economic means. It can be seen as an ideology driving practices like economic colonization, right? So I'll get to the key aspects in a little bit, right? So why is this important, right? If you look at the state of Africa right now, how many African countries have different military bases in other African countries? The answer is very, very small or none, right? Basically, I don't think there's any, right? But you see,
I think just Nigeria in Niger, south of Niger.
Right?
That's just the one I know. Yeah. Then I think
That's the only one I know too.
Yeah, or Niger, but I think it's more of Niger than Chad. Chad, I'm not sure.
Exactly. So very, very minimal. Why is it that there's foreign powers on the continent of Africa with military bases? What are they doing there? What purpose do they serve after they've already colonized us and taken all of our natural resources and plundered and did all these things, right? So these are things that you need to be asking yourself, right? And understanding the game, that the bigger picture of what is actually happening to you, right? It's very, very important. All these things are very, very important because if you don't even also then control your military and your security, it's another form of taking away your sovereignty, right? So the freedom that they said that you had after colonialism does not exist, right? Until you have ownership of all the things I've previously mentioned: your security, your economy, your finance, your data, your Wi-Fi, internet, and your natural resources, right? So I hope you guys can understand that. I just want to beat that into your heads to make you really, really understand what is happening to you, right? It's not that the West is better. It's just that you're colonizing the mind, right? And the minute that you can decolonize completely and understand the bigger picture and what is actually happening to you, the easier that you know how to navigate and for a better Africa, right? And again, so some of the key characteristics, right, include political control, right? So imperialism often involves direct or indirect political control over territories, right? Economic domination, right? So it includes the economic domination of one country over another, often through establishment of monopolies and control over key industries, right? What was happening, not in Nigeria, but in some of these African countries, right? The diamond industries, the gold industries, the oil industries, they're not controlled. Those are some of your key industries. They're not controlled by you, right? And cultural influence, right? This is, again, a huge one. This is one that we were talking about, right? So imperialism can also involve the spread of the colonizing country's culture, language, and values, right? Again, imperialism can also involve the spread of the colonizing country's culture, language, and values, right? This is very important because if you don't know this, you lose. You've already lost the battle, right? You've already lost the battle. If you don't know this, you're then going to deflect and defer to something that's completely different than what you and your roots are, right? So as you guys can see, all throughout Africa, you have these things called the Francophone countries. I hate using that term, and the Anglophone countries, and you're forced to speak the colonizer's language, right? And so it's fine to learn other foreign language, but you should also protect your own language, right? Very, very important, right? Because it's part of your cultural identity, right? So language, your culture, how you think, how you perceive life, right? If you look back in history, we lived a completely different life because Africa is a continent of abundance. So we didn't need to be greedy. We shared with one another. We had communities. It was a completely different type of mindset, right? We were wealthy. We were intellects. We built the first universities the world had ever seen, right? So you need to remember who you were. And anytime that you forget, always you have to go back to those roots. But if you don't have those roots, if they're not teaching that in the school system, then you've already lost, right? If you have another foreign entity school system to replace your own, you've already lost, right? And the values that you have, right? So it's very, very important that you guys understand this, right? So moving forward, so why invest in crypto, right? Here are some of the reasons that I put down that I think that people should look into investing into crypto. Again, separate from Bitcoin, right? The Bitcoin class was in the previous course that Emmanuel taught, right? And I've already, again, broken down the differences between Bitcoin and crypto. Please do not confuse them. They're two separate things. They may seem similar. Yeah, there's some similarities, but they're two completely different things. One of them is just designed to fix the money. That is Bitcoin. It's just designed to fix the money, right? Crypto is, again, a CEO leveraging blockchain technology to build products, right? Two completely different things. One of them is semi-decentralized and the other one is fully decentralized, right? So some of the things that I like about the crypto industry, right, is the high potential returns that you can get, right? And also diversification, right? So for some people who maybe want to save in Bitcoin, but then they have extra liquidity and they want to maybe potentially get higher potential returns and take on those risks, right? And they have a risk appetite, then you can do so with crypto, right? And when I tell you that returns are crazy, they're insane. I just told you Bitcoin has, since inception in 15 years, has done about a 6 million% return. Yeah? So the decentralization and control, right? Semi-decentralized. It's not fully decentralized because remember, a CEO is launching the product and then those products can constantly change. Like you see with Ethereum, they have hard forks and et cetera, right? Which changes the network protocol and the monetary policy. So it's almost similar to an extent as fiat. If your monetary policy can change, Bitcoin's monetary policy cannot change, right? So it's two completely different things. I want you guys to really understand that, right? Two completely different things. Inflation hedge, I would say for Bitcoin, is an inflation hedge, right? But for crypto, it's not. I wouldn't say it's necessarily really an inflation hedge, but I would say it's an instrument you can use to combat inflation or ride the wave of the liquidity cycle, right? So, and also it's technological innovation, right? Obviously, this is we're the precipice of one of the most important pieces of technology and technical infrastructure this world has ever seen, right? So those are some of the reasons that I like investing in crypto, right?
Let me just add something.
Yes.
I would say if you really don't understand, I know most Africans and Nigerians, or let me use African citizens, like we really don't have a stock market. Now, if you don't understand the stock market, I don't think you should just delve into crypto if you really don't understand Bitcoin first,
Yeah.
because the stock market is just like you said, CEO trying to take advantage of blockchain technology, and that CEO would have been doing that on the stock market, but he's just leveraging, he's just taking regulatory arbitrage, so he doesn't have to pay fees to the SEC and file for IPO to issue stock. So with blockchain technology, you can do that and issue crypto, and anyone can jump on it. So if you really don't understand venture capitalism, if you really don't understand the insider, or let's say, if you really don't understand how to value stock, right? I think you'll be on the gambling side when you're going into crypto, right? Because
Yeah.
anything can happen. So you really have to understand how stock market works. So it's not just because some people, like you said, we should differentiate Bitcoin and crypto, because Bitcoin cannot change, right? If you hold Bitcoin for all of his life, you can never lose money. In fact, you always be on the profit side. Even as a Nigerian, it's to give you the hedge and still give you the profit you're looking for. But why on the crypto, you can actually lose money on the crypto because the crypto can fail. I know
Exactly.
people who lost to Luna just because they even Anchor Protocol and all that. Not really because they were doing anything wrong, just because they were holding the Luna and they lost. FTX, Celsius, there are a lot of them. In fact, they keep coming on and going, coming and going. So you really don't understand the venture aspect, that insider aspect. I think sticking to Bitcoin will help you on the long run, because how much do you have? And you're trying to jump on all these things. So just protect your capital with Bitcoin. That's what I would try to. That's what I want to add.
Perfect. Yeah. Great value add again, man. Stan, thank you so much for that. And yeah. So moving on to CBDCs. So CBDCs are central bank digital currencies, right? So they're a digital form of a country's fiat currency issued and regulated by the central bank, leveraging blockchain technology, right? Again, it's a digital form of a country's fiat currency issued and regulated by the central bank, leveraging blockchain technology. So what does that mean for you? That basically means slavery, right? That basically means once this is adopted, that basically means that there's no financial sovereignty at all, zero, because they can track everything on the blockchain because the blockchains are transparent and they own the source code, right? And they can change it whenever they want. Right now, currently in the current system that we have, which I'm going to a little bit break down the SWIFT system in a bit so you guys can see a comparison and then we can talk about it, right? But this is the CBDC that they plan to initiate, the euro, the Fed now betas that have already launched, with the alphas potentially launching very, very soon, right? So unlike cryptocurrencies, which are decentralized, CBDCs are centralized and their value is fixed by the central bank, right? The SWIFT banking system, right? So again, this is again a very, very important point. So that's the CBDC that they're rolling out. Let me break down the current system that they have, right? The current system that majority of fiat runs on, right? Which is the SWIFT banking system, right? So that means the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications, right? So is a global network that enables secure and standardized communication between financial institutions, right? That's the current system that we have right now, right? And here are some of the key points. So when was it established? The SWIFT was founded in 1973 by 239 banks from 15 countries. Again, 1973. Some of us were coming out of colonization. Some of us were still colonized, right? So we weren't part of this. This was not established for our benefit as an African, right? So the purpose, it was created to provide a reliable and secure way for banks to exchange financial transaction information, right? And then, so the function, Swift doesn't transfer money itself, but sends payment orders that must be settled by corresponding accounts between institutions. What does that mean? That means that they send messages to one another, right? So when I send money, let's say Stan, the banks message each other to change their account ledger and update their account ledger, right? And that may take time because they need to verify Stan is really Stan and I'm really me, right? And that's why it takes sometimes 2 to 3 business days, right? So that's the nuance with the Swift banking system. Whereas with crypto, it's instantly because they don't care who you are. It's just peer-to-peer. It's straight me. It's basically crypto or Bitcoin. Let's just use Bitcoin as an example, right? It's basically me having 10,000 Naira in cash and handing it to Stan in cash, but digitally, right? That's the simplest way to put it, right? Peer-to-peer. There is no intermediary, right? There is nobody that you can call on when the transaction didn't go through. That's why it's important to triple check your transactions when you're doing and messing with Bitcoin or with crypto, so you don't send the transaction to the wrong address because you can't revert the transaction, right? It's an immutable ledger. Once it's verified, that's it. It can't be reverted, yeah? Whereas the Swift banking system can, right? So that's some of the, I guess you would call air quotations, advantages to the Swift banking system, right? So the global reach, it connects over 11,000 financial institutions in more than 200 countries, right? So that's what the Swift banking system does. Again, connects 11,000 financial institutions in more than 200 countries. So basically how it works, again, basically I already explained that, right? So it's a messaging network used by banks and other financial instruments to securely transmit information and instructions through a standardized code system, right? Swift codes. So you guys may be familiar with some of these. Each financial institution is assigned a unique Swift code, also known as a BIC. That's a bank identifier code, right? Some of you guys may be familiar with that, which helps identify the bank and its location, right? And so Swift is also used for economic sanctions. Who would have thought, right? So it can be used to impose economic sanctions. For example, certain banks in Russia were removed from the Swift network following geopolitical conflicts, right? As you guys know, America, that's when you hear the word sanctions, what that essentially means is, hey, we control or influence the Swift system, which actually, so they influence the Swift system, right? And so whenever they don't like something that another country is doing, they'll just cut you off, right? So you can't transact. So they make it hard for you to transact. This is what happened with Zimbabwe when they ended up kicking out Westerners, right? Because they were trying to continue doing business. And also, I think we're owning some of the land. I can't remember the full extent of the story, but they were getting pissed because the money wasn't circulating within Zimbabwe. And so they kicked everybody out. The president did. But then America imposed sanctions on them. So now you can't become economical because you're basically shut out of the outside world, right? And now there's ways to bypass the sanctions, right? You see what Russia's doing, where they just initiated now that businesses can now send and receive money in crypto, right? So that's a way to bypass sanctions now. And the best way actually, is with Bitcoin. But if you don't want to use Bitcoin, you use preferably a USDT stablecoin, whatever, you can use that too. But I prefer, Bitcoin. So again, sanctions were also placed on, like I said, the Zimbabwean. We already talked about that. So who owns or controls Swift, right? So the U.S. does not own or directly control the Swift banking system. Again, doesn't own or directly control the Swift banking system. Swift is a Belgian-based cooperative overseen by central banks of the group of 10 or G10 countries, right? So these include United States, but also include Belgium, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Netherlands, Sweden, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom. Did you see any African country within this cohort of people? No, right? So what does that tell you about the Swift banking system? It's a slave banking system, right? It's not meant for you. You need to either create your own or adopt Bitcoin, right? Either or is better, but Bitcoin is obviously the best and most soundest money, and people will eventually understand that, right? It'll take time. However, both U.S. and European Union can exert influence on the SWIFT's governing body, especially when it comes to implementing economic sanctions, right? Very important to know, right? So CBDC, before I get to that, CBDC, SWIFT, it's all the same. One is just worse because now they can track you thoroughly with the blockchain, right? With CBDC. And one is pretty bad because at any point in time, your government can piss off their government, and then they can then stop you from being able to transact internationally with anybody and make it very difficult for you. Luckily, we have Bitcoin, so you can bypass that, right? To be able to get value from or receive value from another person. So, what is money, right? What is money? The current version of money is theft of time, energy, labor, and natural resources. An illusion, right? Not a savings vehicle. Again, I repeat, not a savings vehicle. So if you're in Nigeria or wherever you're at around the world, stop storing your money in the bank and thinking that you're going to save money. You're not saving money. What you're doing is you're losing time, right? Because your time is getting extracted through labor and getting stored in something that's not a savings vehicle. So it's a liability. It's centralized. It's inequitable, right? It's not fair. Dangote can go to the bank right now and go get a loan at a very, very low interest rate. Can you do that? No, right? So it's inequitable. They also print money whenever they feel like it, right? So that's another thing that makes it inequitable because you don't have control over it, and they do, right? Whereas with Bitcoin, everybody has control over it because it's decentralized and they can't make more of it, right? You can't make more of it. It's a depreciating asset, right? So it doesn't increase. So it's a liability, right? It doesn't increase in value. So it's not even an asset. It's a liability. It's restrictive, right? So at any point in time, they can freeze your bank account for something that you did or whatever they think you did wrong or something suspicious that they think. And as I said, they can also do it on a nation state level with sanctions. It's a tool to generate fake wealth without working for it, right? There's no proof of work. With Bitcoin, there's proof of work. And it's a ticking time bomb. So that is money in a nutshell. Any questions on that? No? All right.
I think we just say this is fiat currency, not money.
Yes, fiat currency. Yes. What is the current version of money is what I meant. The fiat currency that we're using, right? Yeah. So I hope you guys can understand that, right? The solution is simple. Buy Bitcoin and opt out. Again, I repeat, the solution is simple. Buy Bitcoin and opt out.
Very simple, man. Very simple.
It's not complicated. Do not overcomplicate all of these things, these 3-part series. This is the simple answer, right? But I had to break all the things down to help you guys understand the components to get to this point, right? Because if I just say this, you'll get confused, right? So I had to break all that down. But this is basically at the end of the conclusion, buy Bitcoin and opt out, right? So this concludes this What is Money 3-part series. I'd like to thank you guys so much. Again, my name is Vanjos Idiake, man. I appreciate you guys for sticking with me. I know, I hope I didn't bore you guys. I hope you guys were entertained. You enjoyed this presentation, and let me know if you guys have any feedback.
I want to say thank you for this coherent lecture. It's very interesting. I just want to add this the previous list, the What is Money list, is actually what we are taught to believe, right? I posted something on my WhatsApp and I was like, Austrian economics is as imperative as exercise, good diet. This is not something you have to go to school to learn. It's like something you need to help yourself. And someone was asking me what's Austrian economics, because some people have not actually heard in their life what Austrian economics is, because We are not taught these things in school. So things like this, you cannot teach them in a normal school system. And so most of us who have gone through the normal school system, we don't have the opportunity to learn things like this. And for you to go deep into this knowledge and get this kind of information, you have to spend years. What he has summarized in a few slides is years of research, right? So I just want
Yeah.
to encourage each and every one of us to take this very seriously. In fact, this is one of the things I try to do in Nigeria. I try to now open the eyes of the adamant, because most people are adamant. In fact, they want, okay, for example, a very renowned economics, he was talking yesterday and he was mentioning CPI of 33% in Nigeria. I told him, can you mention any 10, but in fact, mention anything in Nigeria that has not increased over 200%? And he was arguing with me. He told me to go and he told me to Google. He told me to Google what CPI is. I said, no, don't tell me. It's just like telling me, I'm telling you
True.
the sky is blue, and you're telling me to Google what blue is. I don't
What
have to
blue
Google
means?
it to know. I have an inflation rate of over 200%, and you're telling me to Google CPI. Okay, if you say CPI is a basket of goods, is a basket of goods. And he was, we are on what, this was on Twitter. Very renowned economist. He has subscriber. He has over 100,000 followers. And I'm just a small fish in a vast in the swamp. What I'm saying is,
Whoa.
this is somebody that is addressing million people. In fact, he even has books. And if I call his name, most people might know him. Kalu Aja. He has
What's
books.
his name? Oh, that
Kalu
guy,
Aja. They are the
that financial
financial
experts guy.
experts. Yeah, everyone
Air
knows him in
quotations.
Nigeria.
Cool.
Yeah, everyone
I know
knows
him.
him. You know him. If I call his name, everyone will know him, because in Nigeria he's renowned. But he's in the UK though. He's telling me CPI inflation is 33%. I say, sir, your inflation, monetary inflation, is over 350%. Last year,
Over
Naira,
300. Where is he
Naira,
getting his
Naira.
data from?
You said
Where is he getting his data from?
is normal. Where do they get their data from? Bureau of Statistics. That's
It
their.
doesn't make
Is
sense.
that their
Like, it
currency?
doesn't.
They don't think, because
God.
anything that is not on Bureau of Statistics, they can't use common sense. That's
You
why
can use it.
I always differentiate. In fact, one of the differences between Austrian and Keynesian economics is Austrian economics is common sense. Keynesian economics is distortion of reality. Because you can't
Yeah.
tell me that there is nothing in Nigeria that has not gone up over 300%. From
Nothing.
pump price, fuel, from everything, even the currency itself in 1 year. And you're telling me 33% is CPI. What does that mean? So what I'm saying here is we have to deprogram ourselves, because what we went to learn, in fact, it's even better you don't learn economics in school and come out. And because I was talking to somebody, he didn't study economics in school, but he was able to relate with me well, because he couldn't argue with me. And what I said was common sense. I was teaching him about Bitcoin. So all the things I was saying, from the history of money, from gold, to free market money, nobody chose money, but currency, and say the government must tell us what money is, right? So this school system is just a distortion of reality. There is nothing, especially economics. You can go to school and learn science, and at least you can have sense. But when it comes to economics, man, it's just distortion. It's messed up. It's a mess up of the West. Like, they use their education or their financial system to control the education system,
Yes.
so that we keep believing. Yeah, that's just what it is. The General Education Board that was introduced, I think you said something that the Keynesian economists came in 1930, right? That was from the slide. Thank you. Now that was after, I think, when they had the 61 order, the executive order, the gold executive order 6102 or so. That was around that time.
Yes.
So what
exactly.
I'm just saying is the General Education Board is influenced by the financial system. And it's whatever they tell them to do, because they are the one who fund this thing. They fund the program. So you always dance to their tune. So what I'm saying here is, especially us are from Nigeria and we are listening to this, this is top notch. If Van goes to a school system and teaches this, on the first day he will be sacked. Because yeah, you'll be sacked.
Straight up, man. Like,
straight up.
up.
You can't even finish your first class. They will tell you to leave. Right? So I just want to say thank you for bringing this detailed description of economics, of money, of the banking system and all that. And I just want to add just my last addition. If you want to really go deep down yourself, I want to give us some books we can read for the history of money, the IMF and World Bank and Central Bank. These are the three segments. So for the history of money, read Bitcoin Standard by Sifred Emus. Then the next book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. I actually read this book first before I knew about Bitcoin. So when I started studying Bitcoin, I embraced it immediately because I already read about the financial system and I saw that it was crap. So Bitcoin Standard by Sifred Emus and The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. Then for the IMF and the World Bank, you can read The Last Confessions of an Economic Hitman. He actually confessed.
Drop these books in the group.
Yeah, I'll drop it. I'll drop it on. I'll type it. So he actually he was actually an economic hitman. He was actually the one going to countries. He mentioned all the countries from Argentina to Peru to Cuba, and other African countries. He went to sell this loan. He was actually the hitman. They were calling themselves hitmen. So they were the ones who go in to sell the loan to even this Zimbabwe he talked about. They're the one who goes in to sell the loan to African countries to put them in debt slavery. So that book is very instrumental. It's John Perkins that wrote it. Then the last one is Central Bank 101 by Joseph Wang, or The Fiat Standard by Sifred Emus. I will list all these books in the chat section. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Stan, for that. And anybody have anything else before we go, man?
I also just wanted to say that. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, that your class is super valuable, and I hope we've gotten so much value from it. And yeah, I'm happy it's also recorded, so we can actually put all of these courses on our website, so people can actually access it. Maybe we should also create a YouTube, so people can easily go there and navigate their way around finding these videos. So thank you so much, Van. We appreciate your time for for teaching us about money and its principles. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you guys for joining, man. Hopefully we can spread this knowledge out to the people who missed it, because I think it's very, very valuable for them to really understand. Because if they don't understand these three things, it's going to be hard for them to understand crypto. So we need to spread this to the money. What is money principles is, for me, the most important piece of education to understanding a lot of things of how the world works and why it works the way it does.